Obviously, I did miss a lot of movies in April, but there are three standouts for, yeah, not only are they the worst of April, they're close to, or in some cases, the worst movie I've seen so far in 2016. Now, I could have made this list 5 worst films of April, but I feel that 2 of them aren't bad enough to be deserving of worst of. So I'm just going to give some dishonorable mentions to Ratchet and Clank and The Huntsman Winter's War. Because I gave both of those films 2.5. That's not too bad. I mean, yes, I have listed off movies that are 2 stars in my worst of list. But I don't know. There's just something about those two that I feel they're not worthy enough to be worst of. So number 3 in the worst of April, The Boss. Now I do feel this movie had potential. It has a storyline that could have worked, and the character herself could have worked as a main character of a film. I did laugh a few times, mainly from Melissa McCarthy and Peter Dinklage. The rest of the film was really severely lacking, especially the side characters, the generic subplots. And even though it looks like it's going to be a whole movie about this brownie empire rising up and you get to bond with these different Girl Scouts and they're going to have a bunch of different characteristics, that's only a very small portion of the movie. In fact, that whole thing just feels like a means to an end. The only Girl Scout you get to know as a character is the one they reveal in the trailer, the bully, or the bigger girl, the bully type character that says, "Buy my brownies or die." Overall, it was a mixed bag, but I felt it had potential even though it disappointed me more than I liked it, so I gave it 1.5. Now these other 2 films, as bad as The Boss is, and as bad as you might find The Boss, it's nothing compared to these 2 films. And you know what? Both of them came out on April 1st. If you knew what movies came out April 1st, I think you know exactly which ones I'm talking about. My number 2 worst of April is God's Not Dead 2. This movie didn't make me as furious or as angry as I was when I saw the first one. It did have moments where it improved upon the quality of the first one, but that's not that high of an achievement, considering how bad the quality was of the original. But the one thing that keeps it from getting a 0 is not only that slight improvement, but the fact that the movie is so ridiculous, so over the top, so much of a parody of itself, that it could be considered a movie so bad that it is hilarious and good. That's the only saving grace for God's Not Dead 2, because it's such a premise, such an outlandish premise, that it's hard to believe other people will say, yeah, that thing could really happen. No, it's not that realistic. It's so over the top, so much, it's so focused on a message that it makes all the characters completely unrealistic, cartoony, and no depth whatsoever. It becomes a parody of itself. But whereas I could find some enjoyment just because of how bad God's Not Dead 2 is, I found absolutely no enjoyment with this next film. Not only is it another movie that I gave 0 stars to, but my number 1 worst film of April is also my number 1 worst film of this year so far. And that is a parody, or no, not even a parody, a spoof, because that's the worst thing you can call a parody now, is call it a spoof. And that is a spoof of The Purge. Meet the Blacks. I didn't think it could get as bad as Norm of the North and 50 Shades of Black. I didn't think it could get any worse than those 2 films. But Meet the Blacks proved me wrong. I don't even know where to begin with this movie. I might as well just point you into the direction of my movie review of Meet the Blacks. But not only is it a film that's dumb, unfunny, and just plain bad, the craft itself is flawed and just cheap and poorly done. There are moments in this film where they insert random, and I mean random, animal noises, almost as if, hey, I wonder if the director or the person responsible for rewatching this film will notice this. It's almost like the editors put in a joke there and it stayed in. There's random wolf howls. There's an elephant noise at one point. There's an eagle. I think there was a monkey at some point in the film. Also, the young boy in the film, he wants to be a vampire, or he believes himself as a vampire, so he's dressed up in this Halloween Count Dracula the entire film. And even though he's a human dressed up as a vampire, they give him a monster sound when he roars or hisses. I'm sure that was meant to be funny. It fell on deaf ears for me. Also, the movie has the balls to set up a sequel, to set up a franchise for Meet the Blacks. If that happens, I will scream. If that happens, I feel that the end of the world has come. Also, one of the worst parts of this film is it feels like a Marlon Wayans film, you know, like Haunted House or 50 Shades of Black. It feels like one of those films, just without Marlon Wayans. At least Marlon Wayans is in those films to have some enjoyment with, but Meet the Blacks denies us of even that. So that was my worst films of April 2016. What was the worst films you saw in April this year? If you remember, I'm sure you'll remember the bad movies over the good ones, it seems. So if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe. Check out my movie reviews of 2015 and 2016. I also have a few countdowns here and there. And as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.